Right now, very pleased to have with us the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, Mr. John Lott. Dr. John Lott is with us. Dr. Lott, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Good to talk to you again.
It's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. And I think this is really interesting. The name of your organization makes it crystal clear what your purpose is, doing research to see what policies and practices can best prevent crime. You've been looking at what happens when gun bans are implemented, right?
Right. Well, this is related to work that I did in the third edition of More Guns, Less Crime. But basically what we find is that every place in the world that when you ban guns, you see increases in murder rates. You'd think at least one place you'd find murder rates declining after the ban, but even island nations, even where you'd think it's kind of the ideal experiment for gun control advocates, no neighbor to go and blame, easy to control borders, you still find increases, often extremely large increases in murder rates. It's not just Washington, D.C. and Chicago that most Americans realize saw big increases in murder rates after their gun bans went into effect. It's worldwide.
Okay, so what are some of the places besides D.C. and Chicago that you were able to look at?
Well, if you just look at the island nations that you have, we want to look at places where we have crime data both before and after the ban.
Right.
One place you can look at is England and Wales, where they banned handguns in January 1997. Afterwards, in the next 8 years or so, you saw about a 50% increase in murders that occurred. Now, they've fallen since then. They're back down to near where they were before the ban. But the only reason why they fell after that 9-year increase was because Britain decided to have about a 14% increase in the number of police officers. They had a huge increase in the number of police officers right when you began to see this decline back down in murder rates. But with the gun ban in place, despite this huge increase in the number of police officers, you still have a murder rate that's slightly higher than it was before the ban was implemented.
So what do you think is going on here, Dr. Lott? Is it that maybe conditions for an increase in violent crime were already present and a ban did nothing to stop it, or did the ban actually perhaps enable an increase in the murder rate?
I think the same thing that's happened there and happened in other places, even Washington, D.C. and Chicago, is that when you pass a ban, the question is who's most likely to obey it. And what you find is it's basically the most law-abiding good citizens who turn in their guns, not the criminals. And to the extent that you disarm law-abiding citizens relative to criminals, you actually make it easier for people to go and commit crime rather than harder. And so you have this unintended consequence, I assume, where I think they desire to try to make things safer by banning guns, but if you take them away from law-abiding citizens, you make them easier targets for criminals. And you mentioned, are there other things? Well, if there are other things going on, I try in the estimates that I've done in More Guns, Less Crime for Washington, D.C. and Chicago, the third edition, to go and account for all the hundreds of different factors that I've accounted for in my research on concealed carry. And what you find is that even after you account for those things, when you ban guns, you saw increases in murder rates. So, and when you're looking across countries, it's a little bit harder to do that type of thing. But you'd think if it's just some randomness, some other changes that are occurring, you'd think, well, once in a while, you should see drops in murder rates and violent crimes when these bans go into effect. And the simple point is you just don't see that occurring. Every single time that guns have been banned, you see increases in murder rates. People can see the data by just going to crimeresearch.org, and the graphs are there, and there are links to where the data is for people who want to go and look at things more carefully themselves.
All right, talking with Dr. John Lott. Dr. Lott, does the murder rate ever get back to normal, like after a period of time? For instance, in Washington, D.C., the murder rate after the gun ban was implemented went up steadily through the 90s. It dipped a little bit in the 80s. Then during the late 80s, shot up and before dropping down along with the violent crime rate across the rest of the country. But does it ever get back to what you think the murder rate would be, or what the data would suggest the murder rate would be had a gun ban not been implemented?
No. Well, I mean, first of all, after the D.C. gun ban went into effect in February 1977, there's only 1 year after that, I believe 1984, where the murder rate was as low as it was prior to the ban going into effect. And every other year that the ban was in effect, it was higher. And D.C.'s murder rate rose not only relative to what D.C.'s murder rate used to be, it also rose dramatically relative to other cities. If you look at the murder rates in the top 50 cities, prior to the ban, D.C. was about 20th in terms of the top 50 cities in terms of murder rates. After the ban, it was either number one or number two half the time, and it was in the top 4 cities in terms of murder rates 2/3 of the time. It was never anything remotely close to that prior to the ban going into effect. And after the ban has been removed, D.C.'s murder rates in the 4 years after the ban was removed, D.C.'s murder rates have fallen by over 50%. It's been a dramatic change that started to occur right after the ban was struck down by the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing. The homicide rate in Washington, D.C., 13.9 in 2012. The year before the ban was struck down, it was 30.8. I mean, it's a remarkable decrease. So, Dr. Lott, again, doesn't this, if we're to take this seriously, that every time you implement a gun ban, more people die, doesn't that strike at the very heart of the gun control movement's most fundamental dogma, that more guns equals more crime, that the way to make us safer is, in fact, to ban firearms?
No, I think it's a very powerful argument. And I brought this type of point up with earlier data when I've debated people from the Brady campaign or Bloomberg's gun control group or others, and they say, well, we don't support gun bans. Of course, they have supported gun bans, but beyond that, it's something that gives you an insight into the impact of gun control laws generally. I mean, we all want to try to take guns away from criminals. The problem is that when you pass these types of rules, if whatever they are, if they impact law-abiding citizens relatively more than criminals in terms of disarming them, so you pass taxes on people having guns or fees or registrations or licensing requirements. In Washington, D.C., it costs $530 or so to go through the process to get registered and license a handgun. Well, I don't think criminals who have guns illegally in Washington, D.C. are paying those fees to go and get it. It's primarily disarming law-abiding citizens relative to criminals. And so the basic point is the same, whether you're talking about a ban or not. And I agree with you. It gets to the very basic notion of whether gun control is helpful or not, because you have to answer the same question that you have to answer with bans. Who is most likely to go and obey the law?
Absolutely. Dr. John Lott, thank you again, sir, for coming on the program today. It's great talking to you, as always.
Well, I hope your Thanksgiving went well. And again, people can just go to crimeresearch.org if they're interested in looking at the information more. But thank you very much.